Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Europe podcast. Good morning. It's Thursday, the 26th of February. I'm Caroline Hepker in London.
And I'm Stephen Carroll in Brussels. Coming up today, when great isn't good enough, investors give a tepid reaction to AI chip giant Nvidia's latest upbeat earnings.
Cuban forces kill 4 people who opened fire from an American-registered speedboat.
Plus, satellite images reveal why any US strike on Iran could face serious hurdles as officials prepare for another round of talks.
Let's start with a roundup of our top stories.
Investors have been left unimpressed by the latest blowout earnings forecast from Nvidia. The dominant maker of AI chips says its revenue in the current quarter will be about $78 billion, well ahead of the almost $73 billion that analysts had expected. However, that wasn't enough to excite markets, with shares little changed in post-market trading. Daniel Newman is CEO of technology research firm The Futurum Group.
I think the market has been in this bit of an uncertain space, almost in between whether AI is a bubble or AI is so valuable that it is going to disrupt and basically eliminate entire industries. But Nvidia sits in this really good position where it's providing the quote-unquote arms for this revolution.
Newman's assessment came as Salesforce delivered a lukewarm sales outlook that also failed to impress investors. The software giant has become a poster child for what's been dubbed the AI scare trade. Salesforce shares have dropped about 37% in the past year as investors fear AI will make it easier to build competing products.
The European Union sees the latest US tariffs hitting €4.2 billion worth of exports, with levies above what was agreed in the trade deal with the White House. Bloomberg understands that the bloc sees chemicals and agricultural products as a key area of concern. US Trade Representative Jameson Greer told Bloomberg America will meet its side of the trade deal.
The way to think about this is every country has domestic procedures that they need to go through to come into compliance with the deal. With Brussels, we gave them a good rate on cars. That stays the same. With the UK, we gave them a quota on cars. We gave them a quota of beef to import duty-free. That stays the same. So a lot of these parts stay the same. But just like Brussels hasn't fully implemented its deal or the UK hasn't fully implemented its deal, we also need a couple months now to have some domestic procedures because the Supreme Court struck down all of this.
Greer added that President Trump will sign a directive in the coming days raising his new global tariff to 15%. The International Monetary Fund says the tariff uncertainty risks undercutting an otherwise buoyant US economy.
Friedrich Merz has made the case for building stronger ties with Beijing in a change of tone for Germany's Chancellor. While on a trip to China, the German leader signals that he wants to deepen the German-Chinese relationship, saying the superpower is now a major player.
Both the Chinese and the Germans are aware that our economic exchange contributes significantly to the prosperity of both countries. The fact that 2 of the world's 3 largest economies are engaged in trade with each other generates great momentum, both for us and beyond. The potential that still exists here is also evident from this trip.
Before becoming Germany's Chancellor, Merz made his name as a pro-American politician who was hawkish on China. The German economy has been shedding 10,000 manufacturing jobs a month, experiencing what some economists call the second China shock. But the country is also heavily dependent on critical minerals from China for its manufacturing base.
Bloomberg has learned that the UK's top banks are resisting a plan to boost lending by lowering their capital levels. Ewan Potts has more.
The UK's big banks have had almost 3 months to digest the impact of the Bank of England's push to reduce their capital buffers by 1 percentage point. But senior execs at several top lenders have told Bloomberg they aren't keen to reduce the headroom that they maintain above the regulatory minimum. Ratings agency Fitch has already warned of risks to ratings if banks materially reduce capital ratios. So lenders are alive to the dangers of an increase in the cost of their debt. In London, I'm Ewan Potts, Bloomberg Radio.
Cuban forces say they have killed a number of people who opened fire from a speedboat carrying Florida tags. The country's interior minister said the vessel, which had 10 people on board, approached the Cuban coast. 4 were killed in the confrontation, while 6 others were injured and are now understood to be in custody. Cuban authorities claim the occupants were armed and intended to enter the country to fight against the government. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio said officials are looking into the incident.
I'm not even going to speculate as to what it could have been. It's a wide range of things. But suffice it to say, it is highly unusual to see shootouts in open sea like that. It's not something that happens every day. It's something, frankly, that hasn't happened with Cuba in a very long time. But we're going to find out. We're not going to base our conclusions on what they've told us.
Marco Rubio speaking there as the episode threatens to escalate an already tense standoff between the United States and Cuba.
US and Iranian officials will meet in Geneva today with the latest round of ongoing nuclear talks expected to take place. The discussions come as the US government imposed sanctions on more than 30 entities that support Iranian oil and weapons sales. Republican Senator Steve Davis says that Iran's leadership presents a threat.
I don't trust this regime. There's one thing this regime does understand and respect, and that's strength and that's force. So I know there's a lot of variables, a lot of considerations the president has to take into account, but I do not trust the current regime.
Republican Steve Davies there speaking to Bloomberg yesterday. According to the US Office of Foreign Assets Control, individuals and entities across the Middle East that helped Tehran develop advanced weapons have been blacklisted. In his State of the Union address on Tuesday, President Trump claimed that Iran was working to reconstitute its nuclear program, even as it negotiates with Washington.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says he and President Trump have discussed the next steps for peace talks about the conflict with Russia. In a post on X, the Ukrainian president said the leaders discussed talks between negotiators due to take place in Geneva today, as well as further meetings involving Russia. The news comes as Russia's government weighs a substantial downgrade to its growth forecast for this year as tougher sanctions over the war in Ukraine hit oil revenue. Speaking to Fox News yesterday, US Vice President J.D. Vance acknowledged that efforts to end the fighting had been much more difficult than expected.
And those are our top stories for you this morning. Looking at the markets. So stock futures for the US are in the red. Nasdaq futures down by almost 0.3%, despite Nvidia's outlook that looked very strong, but was not received so positively by markets. The Kospi is also rallying up more than 3%, almost 3.5%, in fact, for the Kospi this morning. The dollar right now is down 0.2%. The Japanese yen strengthening 0.2 after the Bank of Japan's Ueda signals the intention to continue a tightening policy there. Brent crude futures fairly steady this morning at $71, up by 0.2%. Those are the markets.
In a moment, more on why Nvidia's results weren't enough for investors, plus how satellite images show any US strike on Iran may not produce the results that President Trump would want. But another story that we've been reading this morning about how the middle-aged are the new customers for nose jobs. Alina Dizik has been writing about this trend in the United States of people in their 40s and older opting for discreet plastic surgery to counteract the effects of ageing. Now, according to industry groups, the number of rhinoplasties are rising, but also the numbers getting nose filler procedures, which are cheaper and require less recovery time. Apparently part of the increase of demand for this has come from people looking at themselves more on video calls or on their phone cameras.
Right.
Now, these new treatments come with their own risks, but the fact that they can be done in most cases in a day without significant recovery time, that, you know, you can go into work and people won't necessarily know, and they cost thousands of dollars less as well, is part of what's attracting people to it. I'm really not sure about this.
Well, I saw the photographs and I hadn't quite understood what this surgery did. But when I saw the pictures in this story, I understood it much more. Look, there are risks, and part of the story was all about how, you know, maybe if it's kind of high street procedures, you know, with people who aren't doctors, maybe you need to be.
What high street are you going to?
Well, look, I mean, fillers and so on are in beauty salons on any high street. And exactly. Look, I just want to throw one number into this conversation. Nearly 90% of all plastic surgery around the world, as far as I can make out, is women. And so I worry about that side of it.
Yeah, perhaps another concern to add to several others that I have about this trend as well. But it's an interesting read and certainly a trend that I wasn't aware of. We'll put a link to Alina's piece on our podcast show notes. Well, let's dig into the earnings from Nvidia now and what they tell us about investor expectations around artificial intelligence. Our senior market strategist, Neil Campling, joins us now for more. Neil, good morning. Nvidia's expecting $78 billion in revenue in this quarter. It's better than had been forecast. Why don't investors seem impressed?
I think the expectations were so high that effectively Nvidia and Jensen Huang needed to have another mic drop moment like they did in May 2023 to really surprise to the upside. So despite a $6 billion beat in terms of the guidance on revenues, it's just simply that expectations are so high, and it's, as good as it gets, effectively. And that's kind of the problem. Despite the fact that on the call, he talked about skyrocketing adoption of the agents, and that hyperscalers were 50% of data center revenues in the fiscal fourth quarter. Plus, free cash flow also more than doubled year on year to $35 billion. But there were some questions. There were some questions around the fact that supply commitments have gone from $50 billion to $95 billion. Why is that? It's probably to secure memory, given it's in such short supply and prices are skyrocketing. Also, there's the OpenAI investment, which is concerning some investors. And the thing is, we still haven't got a definitive answer to when that investment is completed. So there are some questions that linger, I think, in investors' minds.
Okay, that's really interesting. And one notable thing was that the share price of Nvidia went down during that call with analysts. So that was part of the story about why people think that investors were disappointed a little bit. What did we learn then about chip supplies and this kind of impact that it's having on the wider tech sector? You sort of mentioned it a little bit there.
Yeah, absolutely. So they mentioned that they themselves were able to get the supplies that they required. But of course, there's only a limited amount of memory to go around, for example. So if they're taking supply, there's also the question of who else isn't getting the supply. So that's one concern, I think. And in the wider tech market, even though on the call they were saying that their customers were making profits from these investments, there's a bigger concern that given the hyperscaler capex that we are seeing, which for the big hyperscalers in the US, we're now looking at $650 billion of investment this year, the question remains, when will we see significant return on investment from that spending? And we haven't yet got the answer to that.
Okay, Neil, thanks very much for joining us. Our senior market strategist, Neil Campling, joining us there on Nvidia. Of course, the question of China, very central to that as well. Nvidia is still facing uncertainty. They've got the licenses for a small amount of H200 processors, but say they don't know if the Chinese government will give their approval. Another strand to that story on Nvidia. Stay with us. More from Bloomberg Daybreak Europe coming up after this.
Now, the US president has claimed that military victory in Iran would be easy, but Bloomberg reporting using data and satellite imagery shows the reality may be more difficult with hidden facilities and stockpiles amid rugged terrain. Joining us now is Bloomberg's Jonathan Tyrone, who covers nuclear diplomacy in Vienna. And we know, Jonathan, that there are discussions and talks between Iran and the US beginning again today. But on this story, what has Iran actually been doing to prepare on the ground in the country, maybe for a possible conflict?
Well, we wanted to do a little bit of a reality check on some of the claims and the ease with which Iran's program could be disrupted. And what we saw is, this is a vast infrastructure that we knew. What we saw in the updated satellite imagery is that Iran has been busy at work, not only clearing debris and rebuilding sites that were damaged in the June attacks, but backfilling tunnels and protecting infrastructure against a future attack. And so the idea that a strike would be easy and be able to easily degrade Iran's remaining nuclear infrastructure and ballistic missile capacities is tenuous at best.
Of course, President Trump had claimed the US had obliterated nuclear sites after the bombing in June of last year. What is happening at the key nuclear sites, the likes of Isfahan, that we were hearing so much about?
Well, at Isfahan, the majority of the above-ground uranium processing facilities do remain obliterated, to use the White House expression. However, what we see in nearby sites where Iran's stockpile of highly enriched uranium, that's the near bomb grade material that could be quickly turned into a nuclear weapon. We see Iranian engineers preparing for a strike, protecting the site by filling entrances with debris that would protect it from collapse should a new strike take place. At Iran's Natanz facility, that's the largest enrichment manufacturing site. Iran has already rebuilt and put a roof onto a new facility that was previously known as the pilot fuel enrichment plant. And perhaps most concerning is the suspected third enrichment site. It's a site called Pickaxe Mountain. It's just south of Natanz. And again, Iran is preparing for an attack by reinforcing tunnel entrances. This is another site that's built into the side of a mountain and has natural protections from any attack. And then, of course, generally, it's been more than 8 months, and international inspectors who had previously been verifying the state of Iran's enriched uranium on a weekly basis, they haven't had any access. So questions have grown about the state of Iran's nuclear program, but what we see in the satellite images is that it's certainly not static.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.